It's 12:01, and I think we're going to start the first in our three-part mental health webinar series, starting with stress management today, Tuesday, April 12th. We have quite a few people logging on, and the participant list continues to grow. I'm so excited you guys could meet us here today. I am Kristen Jackson with Recenter. We are a flex-time workspace for mental health providers here in Denver, Colorado. I also volunteer with Energize Colorado, leading up their mental health team. For our mental health team, we bring mental health resources to the local Colorado small business community, and also business resources and business education to therapists within our great state of Colorado. A little bit about what we're doing. This is, again, our first in a three-part webinar series. So if you haven't already registered for the other two, please go do that, which are, the other two are next Tuesday, April 20th. We'll be talking about mindfulness. And Tuesday, April 27th, we'll be talking about self-care. Part of our work with Energize, who is, let me tell you a little bit about Energize while we're at it. Energize is a local nonprofit here in Colorado. Our aim is to advance resilience and promote equity across Colorado's small business ecosystem. We're builders and innovators focused on serving Colorado's smallest and most underserved businesses across 4 priority groups: BIPOC, women, veteran, and rural communities. And part of that work, we have partnered with the Johnson Depression Center over at CU Anschutz. And we're lucky enough to have Alex Yanacone, who is the Director of Education and Community Programs at the Helen and Arthur E. Johnson Depression Center. Alex provides programs and trainings addressing mental health issues across Colorado. A little bit about the JDC, the Johnson Depression Center, is dedicated to improving the lives of people with depression and mood disorders through clinical excellence, innovative research, and community programs and education. So that is our intro. And with that, I will pass it over to Alex. Thanks so much for joining us, Alex.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Thanks everybody for joining today. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Really for this, all that you need to have is a pen or pencil or just something. There we go. Hopefully you guys can all see my screen now. Just something to jot things down. A Word document works as well. Because even though we are going to be talking about stress today, really our goal is to give you tools and tips that you can actually utilize. So we're going to be practicing this as we go. So that's really all you need. We'll also be using the chat for some discussion. So if you have access to that, that would be great. For questions, obviously use the chat as well. If you have specific questions about the slides, please ask those in the moment. If you have more general questions, I'm going to ask just to have you wait till the end, just so I don't miss anything. And we'll make sure there's plenty of time at the end for questions that come up. So we'll go ahead and get started and talk a little bit more about stress. So none of this is news to you, but I think we know that stress definitely impacts how we show up to work. It also impacts how we show up in our personal life as well. But as we have all probably experienced at one point or another, we know that when we are stressed out, that our performance is definitely impacted. How we communicate and engage with our coworkers or our leadership is obviously impacted as well. What we're able to produce or get out there or be able to actually accomplish in a day, a lot of times is negatively impacted. And just really all aspects of how we show up, who we are, how we interact with others. I don't think this is news, but following financial concerns, work tends to be our second highest source of stress. A lot of us have quit jobs because of the stress we've experienced. A lot of us have missed days of work because of the stress that we endure. And then we also have this idea of presenteeism, which is where we actually show up. So whether you're at home working or in an office, you're actually showing up behind a screen or in an office and you're present, but you're not actually getting anything done because you're so overwhelmed with stress or what you are dealing with that you're not able to stay focused or motivated. And then obviously this can cost a lot as well. So again, I don't think this is rocket science to anybody, but we do know that stress absolutely takes a toll on us and really impacts our overall performance. So we are going to work on ideally minimizing this a little bit. So what I would like you to do is take a moment and write down 5 things that are currently causing you stress in your life. So a few things about this. This can be any part of your life. It can be personal, it can be events you have coming up, it can be work related, it could be relationship related. So any kind of stressor that you're dealing with. Also want you to be specific. So not just, work, but what about work is stressful right now? So be really specific in your description of what that stressor is. So if you have more than 5, feel free to jot those down. If you have less than 5, that's obviously fine as well. But take a moment just to write those down. You see this chart I have here. I will walk us through those 3 other columns as we go. So if you want to, you can make that as well. But I will, like I said, I will walk us through that. So I'll give you just a moment to do that for yourself. All right, so you may still be kind of brainstorming or thinking about this a little. Feel free to continue to jot down your 5 stressors as we go. You're not going to be sharing these, so these are just for you. But again, we're going to be using these as we talk about how we can do a better job at managing it as we go. So feel free to add as we continue. All right, so one way that we can think about stress is to think of a glass of water. So when you think of a glass of water and the actual weight of a glass of water, we very rarely think about it because it doesn't actually weigh that much. And if somebody asked you to hold on to a glass of water for a minute, you would think nothing of it. You could easily do that. If somebody said, hey, can you hold on to this glass of water for the next 2 hours straight, it'd be increasingly more difficult for us. And if somebody said, hey, you have to hold on to this glass of water for the next 24 hours straight without setting it down, be pretty impossible for most of us. And what we know about the glass of water is that the weight doesn't change, but the longer that we hold on to it, the heavier it becomes. And that is the exact same way that we can think about stress. The longer that we hold on to our stress, the heavier it becomes, the harder it is to manage. And so we have to find ways that we can set that glass of water down, that we can relieve some of that strain and that heaviness that it brings for us, and take breaks where we need to. So this can be a way that we can think of our stress moving forward and how we can recognize ways we can set it down, release some of that tension as we are dealing with everything that we have to each day. But with that, we do know that stress has a job. There's a reason that we have it. In the chat, anybody want to note what they think the purpose of stress is? Why do we have it? Safety, survival, getting things done. Perfect. Yeah, these are all exactly why we have stress, right? There is a purpose. There's a reason we have that. When we focus, when we think kind of to the core of our instincts of keeping us safe, motivating us, having us be able to accomplish the things that we need to. At its core, stress is a protective system for us, for all the reasons that you all mentioned. And a few things ways that we can kind of think about it is thinking of it as that kind of best friend who is always chirping in your ear, things that are important or that you need to hear, or kind of the truths that are hard for us to recognize, that we don't want to hear, but are important, are necessary, and that we need to be paying attention to. Also thinking of it as that alarm clock, trying to wake us up, trying to have us be alerted on that we need to take action, we need to do something, or that big, red warning sign in our face saying, stop what you're doing, pay attention to this. This is something you need to pay attention to. So those are, just a few ways we can think of it. But as you guys mentioned, it help us focus. It's a motivator, it's safety. It really is this protective system, really trying to alert us on things to keep us safe and protect us. And I think we all can recognize that stress does have a positive impact on our performance in some areas, right? So when we have absolutely no stress, we actually see that we're pretty inactive. There's not a lot going on. So some levels of stress actually help motivate us, as you guys mentioned, help keep us focused. We also know that it makes us better problem solvers, more energetic, more creative in what we do. So it has a lot of positive impacts on our performance. But as we have all experienced, we also note that when that stress continues, that our performance really starts to take a decline. We're tired all the time, yet at night we can't sleep. We're really irritable. Our anxiety starts to increase. And a lot of us have had burnout or breakdown happen as well. So it's not realistic for us to stay perfectly in the middle of this. We know that we are going to fluctuate depending on what we're experiencing, what we're doing. But we do know that we can learn skills to help us move ourselves in a positive way on this bell curve. And so recognizing that when we are seeing our stress levels really increase and our performance starting to decline, what are some things I can do to pull it back so that I'm really using it in a positive way. So that's part of what we're going to try to learn today, of how we can find a balance in this. So again, just to kind of highlight here, stress's job is protection. And what it does is it gives us logical warning signs to pay attention. So it tries to get your attention by alerting you on things you actually care about. This is not a positive message. We are not hearing from our stress that, oh, you're definitely going to get that job promotion, or everything's going great with your family right now, or you're going to do great on that presentation you have next week. It's usually pretty doom or gloom in the way stress comes up, saying, you're not going to get that job promotion, or things are a disaster with your family right now, or, that presentation you're not prepared for at all. If it was positive, we would ignore it, right? We wouldn't even pay attention to it. So it does come up in these kind of negative ways because it wants us to pay attention. And so that's usually how we hear our stressors, and recognizing that in most cases, we also try to push that away as well. So we have to learn skills to really listen to our stressors and then take action on it. So we are going to go through a few key tools to help manage this a little bit better. So the first thing is very simple, and yet something that we don't typically do. And that's really to take a pause and actually listen to what the message is behind our stressor. Why is this coming up for me? Why is this an issue right now? Again, as I mentioned, we tend to try to block it out or try to, push it aside and say, I don't have time for this. I'm not going to deal with this right now. The problem with that is it doesn't make it go away. It usually makes it grow louder or more of an issue. So if we take that moment just to listen to it and unpack the message behind it, we then recognize what we need to do with it. So these examples right here are pretty simple, and obviously for each person, they're going to be pretty different, but here's some different messages we may hear. So I'm juggling work and family. One message could be, now that I'm working at home, I feel like I'm not able to commit to my work the way that I want to. Or work is so overwhelming right now that I don't feel like I'm giving my family the attention that they need. I'm fighting with my partner. Could be, I really care about this relationship and I want to make things work. Or it could be, I'm really questioning if this is the relationship I should be in right now. I'm nervous for my performance review. Could be, I've worked really hard this last year to show that I deserve to be where I'm at, or I deserve that promotion that I'm up for. So again, this is going to be unique for each person, but it allows us to listen to what's going on and why it is a stressor for us. So I want you just to take one of your stressors and figure out why it's coming up for you. What's the message behind it? So take just a moment to do that for yourself. I'll give you just a couple seconds here to jot that down next to just one of your stressors. All right, so hopefully not, again, too difficult of a task, but something we don't typically do, of tuning into our stressors, really listening to what's coming up for you, why it's coming up for you, so that we can then do our next piece here, which is ideally take some action on it. So now that we know what our stressor is, why it's coming up or why it's an issue, we want to figure out, well, what do I do with that? So typically we can categorize our stressors into one of these three areas. We have fixable, unfixable, and overreaction. So I do want to know, I know this can very much oversimplify life, and not everything perfectly fits into a bucket and then we move forward with whatever we're doing. That would be wonderful if that's how it was, but we know realistically that it's not always going to be that simple. However, this does give us some organization into our stressors so that we can ideally figure out ways to manage them a little bit better. So although it may not work for everything, we do know it can work for a lot of what we're dealing with, and be able to tweak some things to work on those as we move forward. So when we look at these different types, there's kind of some uniqueness to each of these. So the first one being a fixable stressor, excuse me. A fixable stressor is something that we actually have control over, something that we can take action on, that we know what we need to do, even though it's not easy or simple necessarily, but we actually have the ability to do something about it. Thinking about, having a check engine light on in your car, even though it could be stressful, it could cost money, it could, a lot of different things could be going on. I can do something to get my car into the shop, have it looked at, figure out what next steps could be. It's stressful, but it's something that I can actually do something about. When we think about unfixables, these are ones that are more out of our control, that we don't have control over that end outcome or what we're going to do there. So really, when we look at all things COVID, a lot of what happened really was unfixable. A lot of the things happening around us were out of our control. There were obviously things we could do, but a lot of things that were happening coming from a state level, global level, work level, there wasn't a lot that we could say, oh, that's something I can control and do something about. It was things being put into place around us. Also thinking about like financial things. So your kid's tuition went up or your own tuition went up for school. We can't change that. Is it a stressor? Absolutely. But it's out of our control. And then the last one here are overreactions. So overreactions tend to be stressors that are too far in the future or too far really out of our reach or too kind of grand for us to be holding on to right now in this moment. Doesn't mean that they're not important. It's just not something we should be carrying with us at this point. So when we look at these examples, and obviously these are up for interpretation, but when you look at a new policy at work, what would you think that would maybe fall under? Would that be fixable, unfixable, overreaction, or a combination? And again, you can use the chat to jot that down. So Pat mentioned a combination, which absolutely it could be. Anne mentioned an overreaction. So again, this is totally up for interpretation. And Amanda wrote unfixable. Combination, Sherry said, I would assume if it doesn't work, you could contribute another solution. So yes, and again, I'm going to fixable because I can decide how to respond. So these are great examples of how you can interpret this. And absolutely, it could be any of those that you said. Kind of from a very broad perspective, a new policy at work could change, how things are, how it impacts your work, kind of more obstacles, make things more stressful for you. But it doesn't mean that you can change that policy, right? I can't say, well, nope, that policy, I'm not going to abide by it. And there's that. But to, I think it was Carol's point, you can find other solutions if you would like. But kind of in the broad sense, that one would maybe be more of an unfixable. But again, just kind of thinking of this, each interpretation that you guys mentioned absolutely works as well. When we look at where will I be in the next 2 years, that one kind of in a broad sense, again, would maybe fall under overreaction. Doesn't mean it's not important or not something you should think about, but if you're carrying that with you right now, kind of taking a step back and being like, what is this doing to help me? How is this being useful to me? And maybe what do I need to refocus on? And then I have a work deadline due by the end of the week. That one typically would fall under fixable because I have control over it. Typically that work deadline would fall under my job description of what I need to do. Even though it could be stressful and difficult and hard, it's still something in my control. So I like that you guys all kind of had different inputs there because I think it really does show how this is up to each of us individually. So I want you to take a moment and to look at each of your stressors and to identify what you think they fall under. Are they fixables, unfixables, overreactions, or a combination? And then in the chat, after you do that, if you would like, I would like to hear kind of if you've noticed a theme, like I have a lot of fixables, or most of mine are overreactions, or it's a total mix of them. So take a moment just to do that for yourself. So in the chat, it was mentioned 3 are fixables, 2 are combination of unfixable. I have a mix of all 3. I have a mix. And when I have fixables, I'm taking action, and what's left, the stressor is unfixable part. So it sounds like there's a lot of mixing going on, which, you may want to kind of note this, moving forward as, do you note that, yeah, it's always kind of a mix, or maybe there's certain times in your life that it feels like there's a lot more unfixables, or you may notice some trends that happen, or maybe it's just a complete hodgepodge as you go forward. So just something to kind of think about with your stressors. And sometimes the stress makes it hard to differentiate. And they are, that, a lot of them can be complex, right? They can be a mix and hard to differentiate what they are. You can sometimes piece them out and say, okay, this piece is fixable, this piece is still unfixable. And we'll talk about how to help address some of this as we go. So now that we've identified where they kind of fall, the next thing to do is actually figure out, what do we do? So with fixables, typically we want to make an action plan. We want to get it off our list, want to do something about it. Unfixables, we can't necessarily change the outcome of what's happening, but we have to figure out, how do I get support? How do I release some of the tension that I'm dealing with? And then our overreactions, we want to challenge it. We want to give it some perspective. So we'll go through each of these in a little more detail. So with fixables, and again, this may not work for all your fixables, but it's something to try to utilize, or at least attempt to see what pieces you may be able to use. So again, with our fixables, a lot of what's kind of stopping us from it is that we haven't really broken it down, or we haven't really identified what we need to do, or how to take those first steps. So an action plan can be really helpful to address this. One of the main things that kind of keeps us where we are and not actually addressing fixables is that we've never done it before, or it's something new to us, or something a little bit foreign to us. So it feels overwhelming, or feels kind of difficult to tackle. So one thing that we can do, if that's kind of where we're sitting, is we can kind of look at, well, how can I get some help to figure out how to get started on this? So if you're thinking about kind of a work related thing. It's something new, something a little uncomfortable for you. Is there anybody that you work with or anybody that you know who has been in similar situations that you can consult with or that you can talk to learn, what did you do when you were in this situation? What were the first couple steps that you kind of accomplished to get going on this? So getting help from others who have gone through something similar can be helpful. I always give the example of when I was trying to find childcare for my first kiddo. It was really overwhelming for me. And even though it was fixable, I didn't even know where to start. I had never had to find childcare. It was totally foreign to me. And so one of the best things I did was to start asking some of my neighbors, some of my coworkers, some of my family who had just gone through something similar and say, what did you do to start? Like, I don't even know where to begin. And so getting some ideas from others made it a little bit easier for me to get started as well. On top of that, we know that planning and organizing is also really important. So what I typically do when I have a fixable stressor is I'll put it on my calendar and I'm thinking, oh, I'm organized. I said, I'm going to figure out childcare on Friday and I'll go ahead and do it. And then Friday comes along and I'm like, oh, I got other things I need to do. I'll take care of it on Tuesday. And it's because figuring out childcare in a day is not that easy. It's not something that can just be checked off my list in a day. And so actually breaking it down into baby steps makes me more motivated to do it and actually makes it more achievable as well. So instead of blocking out Friday and saying, I'm going to take care of this, instead saying on Friday, I'm going to figure out what I can afford in childcare. I'm going to do kind of some financial planning to figure out what I can actually afford. I'm going to take 20, 30 minutes to do that and actually putting that on my calendar. Then on Tuesday, based on what I'm able to afford, let me figure out what kind of facility I want my child to be in. So breaking it down into these smaller steps makes us more capable to actually achieve it and actually take action on it. And the last piece is accountability. So typically we just say, well, I'll just hold myself accountable and take care of this. But we are also really good at procrastinating and talking ourselves out of things. So when we have somebody else from the outside, whether it's, a partner, a friend, a family, a colleague saying, hey, will you check up on me on Tuesday and see where I am in this project? That actually having that deadline motivates us to get something done in that time period. So accountability can also be another piece that can be really helpful. So to kind of put this into action, I want you guys just to try this a little bit for yourself. Just take one of your fixables. You've already identified what it is. If there is a completion date, jot that down. If not, don't worry about that. You don't need to have one. Then I want you to write down what are some of the resources that could maybe help you accomplish that goal and who could hold you accountable. It could just be a phone call, it could be a text, just somebody to check in, or it could be somebody really reviewing what you're doing or taking a bigger role in that. Then I want you to identify what are some of the barriers that may get in the way of you accomplishing that, and then what could you do to possibly overcome that as well. So I'll give you just about 2 minutes to fill this out for yourself. All right, so if you're still working on this, that's totally fine. And again, may not work perfectly with some of your stressors, but we can pull pieces that may be helpful for some of our fixables to actually start doing something with it and really trying to set that glass of water down for ourselves. So moving on to our unfixables, these are things, like I mentioned, that are more out of our control. So not able to necessarily change outcomes, but we do have to figure out ways that we're going to manage the stress and kind of the toll that it may take on us as it's something that we're going to have to endure, that we're going to have to deal with. So when we talk about healthy ways to release our emotions, it's really just thinking a lot about your self-care, your coping, your problem-solving strategies. How do you deal with challenges? How do you deal with adversities or difficult things? A lot of us have some pretty unhealthy coping strategies, right? We maybe have, we stay up late, we, eat terribly, whatever it may be. So a lot of us have kind of really bad habits around us. So we want to think about what are some ways that I can create some healthy habits to manage stress. And this is where we do look at self-care a lot. And we will be doing a self-care session, but really thinking about the benefits of taking care of ourselves during those really stressful times. What research actually shows is that when we have healthy self-care habits, that we are actually way more productive during the most stressful times of our lives. And typically we do the opposite, right? During really stressful times, self-care goes out the window. But we found that to be really detrimental to how we handle and how we manage that stressful situation. So it's just to kind of identify what are some healthy habits I can do. We don't want this to be a crazy reach, right? Like, oh, I'm going to work out 7 days a week. Well, we're already stressed. We have enough on our plate, and adding an hour every day of something else is not going to be helpful for a lot of people. But saying, you know what, it'd be good if 3 days a week I woke up maybe 5 minutes early and stretched, and just recognizing the benefit of that. Or maybe I'll try a 3-minute mindfulness exercise and see how that helps me in the middle of the day. Or maybe during my workday, I'll just, get up at 1 o'clock and go on a 15-minute walk and just get outside. So just recognizing some of those healthy habits that we can do during those stressful times. Regardless of what you do to cope or manage, we also know that with unfixable stressors, a lot of times we need support around what we're managing or what we're dealing with. So when we talk about a support team, it can be just one person, it can be numerous people, and it's going to be unique depending on what that unfixable stressor is, but identifying someone or a group of people that can really help as we're dealing with that issue. So this advocacy formula, again, very simple, but not something we typically do when we have unfixable stressors. Typically, we expect people to know what they can do to help us. And then when that is not met or when that's not happening, it adds to our stress. So this actually gives us the words and the communication to say what we're dealing with, how it shows up, and how they can support us. It does not mean they are fixing it. It just means that they are helping, ideally, to manage that issue a little bit better for yourself. So a quick example of what this could look like is you could tell a partner something like, I'm dealing with my mom being sick. I have a sick parent. How this is showing up in my life is at the end of the day, I feel completely drained. How you can support me is when I'm finished with the day, get the kids out of the house just for 10 or 15 minutes so I can be by myself and just kind of have that little bit of time to be alone. So again, not fixing it, but also giving me maybe the space that I'm needing to help with my day. This is going to obviously be very unique for each person and each situation as well, but it's really identifying what little things may help us. For some people, it may be, I need somebody to vent to, like, can we grab a cup of coffee once a week? Or others, it's like, I need space, I need to be alone. So really, it's going to be unique for each person. So take a moment and just jot this down for one of your unfixables. Identify who that person or that group of people are. You already know what you're dealing with, but identify how it shows up in your life and how they could help you with managing that a little bit better. So I'll give you just a minute to do that as well. And when you're done in the chat, you don't have to say what your unfixable is, but I would be interested to hear, how does this show up in your life? How does unfixable stressors show up? As I mentioned, feeling completely drained. What are other things that you guys may know of how it may show up? Hopeless that things will change. So feeling stuck, absolutely. Exhausted, anxiety, guilt, panic attacks. These are great examples. We hear a lot of how it impacts our sleep, how feeling overwhelmed, how we may be irritable or kind of lash out at people we care about. Sadness, that's a great one as well. And again, it can vary depending on what, feeling depleted, absolutely. Vary on what you're dealing with, but really can show how each of us kind of internalize or really handle those unfixable stressors. Again, it's not that we can fix this overnight, but it really does show that there are little things that maybe somebody else in our life can help with. Again, not perfect, but being able to help us manage that a little bit better. Talking about communication, negative self-talk, and lack of motivation. Those are good examples as well. This is also really helpful if you know somebody else who is going through something difficult or dealing with an unfixable stressor. We very much assume kind of what other people need as well. So like, oh, they probably just need to talk to somebody, or maybe they just need some space. We kind of project what would be helpful to us on other people. And we all are unique. We all need different things. So it can be helpful to say, hey, I know that you're dealing with a sick mom right now, and that's got to be really hard and stressful. What can I do that would be helpful for you? Do you want me to check in? Do you want me to give you more space? Would it be helpful for me to cook you a dinner? Whatever it may be, but give some suggestions, but also allowing them to choose what may be helpful for them as well. Because again, each person is kind of unique and different in what may be useful for them. All right, our next one here is our overreactions, right? So we want to give our stress system some perspective when we're talking about overreactions. So these are just a few things we can try with these that may help. So overreactions, again, tend to be a little far in the future or a little out of reach, that we shouldn't be holding on to them so tightly right now. So rating it is a very simple task, but sometimes gives us that visual that we need to identify that, you know what, this is not something I should be holding on to right now. So on a scale from 1 to 10, life or death, where does this actually fall? Typically we find it falls, 3 or under. Like, it's not really that big of a deal. I'm just holding on so tightly to this. And when we're able to see that kind of visual piece, we recognize, you know what, I need to let go of this. This isn't that big of a deal, or this isn't something I need to be carrying right now. We also can be on the lookout. So these are things that we may be super stressed out about the holidays next year. Come November, December, we're already stressing about that. And the thing about that is, it's not to say that's not a stressful time, but what are you actually doing now to maybe make that time a little bit less stressful? So thinking a little bit ahead, being on the lookout of what are some things I can take action on now that may change that. Maybe last year was a total disaster, and this year I've decided, you know what, I want to go on vacation. So I'm going to book a trip somewhere, and I'm just going to be by myself, or I'm just going to be with me and my immediate family. So doing things now so that when that time comes, and as you're dreading that coming up, you're not just adding to that stress, that you're actually taking baby steps to address it. With mission in life, there are some times that there are things that stress us out that we recognize I am okay with what comes with that. So for example, if you want to start your own business, or have this passion to do something really big, we know that there's a lot of stress that's going to come with that. That's inevitable. But for a lot of us that are in those situations that really have that passion, that drive, we also recognize this is really stressful, and it's going to be stressful for the next couple of years, but I'm okay with that because it's going to make me accomplish what I've been wanting to do, what I'm passionate about, what I've been driving towards anyways. So we almost kind of have this contentment with, there's a lot of stress that comes in this time period. I want to accomplish this and I'm okay with it. On a smaller scale, I'm hate flying. It totally stresses me out every single time. So I have a trip booked in November, stresses me out. It'll stress me out up until the day that I get there. But I also recognize that there's going to be stress that comes with that. And I'm okay with it because I want to go travel. I want to see the things I want to, and I'm going to manage it as it comes. And so just recognizing that that's just kind of part of what that is for me. And then our A through Z, you know, this is again where we kind of can break it down, where maybe a goal is to, you know, buy a home in the next couple of years. Obviously that can be extremely stressful, but it doesn't mean that in the next couple of years, I just got to walk in and own a home. What are some things I need to do now? Do I need to start saving? And if I do, how much do I need to save each month? What do I need to do to figure out how to get a loan? Do I know where and what kind of housing I want to live in? So taking care of little things at a time so that you can accomplish that thing that you're wanting to, or that piece that you're trying to get towards. So those are just a few examples of how we can address some of our overreactions. Another helpful tool is to actually order our to-do list. So one of the biggest excuses we have with our stressors is I have a lot of stress and I don't have enough time. And although that absolutely is the truth in a lot of situations, we also know that we aren't great with time management. And what we typically do is we manage or we deal with the stressors that are kind of low priority, don't really have a deadline, not that big of a deal, kind of manage those at first. And then all of a sudden we're like, oh my gosh, I have this huge work deadline I have to deal with, but I have no time to do it. And it's because I haven't been really paying attention to what I need to be doing in a certain amount of time. So to have a better idea around this, we can rate each of our stressors on priority and deadline. So priority is how important something is. Scale from 0 to 10, 10 being very important. How important is this stressor? And then deadline on a scale from 0 to 10, when is this actually due? Obviously, the higher the priority, the higher the deadline. Those are things we should be managing or dealing with first, and then work our way down from there. Again, typically we kind of do it in the opposite way. So what I'd like you to do is just to rate each of your stressors on priority on 0 to 10, so how important, and deadline 0 to 10. So when is it actually due? So take a moment and just next to each of your stressors, write a scale of priority and deadline. All right, so hopefully you were able to kind of have a little bit of a gauge on that, and that should help a little bit with time management. We also know there's times in your life where things are stressful and we don't have enough time, but for some of those other times where we actually are just not doing a great job managing it, this can help us prioritize what we need to take up first and then move from there. So we're going to go over just a few quick kind of preventative or tips that may also help with some of this as we go. So we touched on self-care, but this is really to highlight that a little bit more. We know taking care of yourself absolutely impacts our stress. So thinking about the things that you enjoy doing, things that you're good at, things that motivate you, that help you. These are all things we want you to engage in and really prioritize for yourself. So yoga and meditation is not for everybody, but obviously there are some proven outcomes of the benefit it has, especially around stress. If you've never done a mindfulness exercise or yoga or any of that, try it out. If you don't like it, that's fine. You never have to do it again, but also see maybe it helped. Maybe that, 2-minute mindfulness exercise kind of helped me refocus, and I'm actually able to get some work done now. So really thinking about that a little bit more and seeing if that's something that may benefit you. If not, a lot of other options. Nutrition is something else that we don't pay a lot of attention to on how it actually impacts our mental health. But thinking about when we're super stressed out, we typically eat pretty unhealthy because we're busy and we don't feel like we have a lot of time. So we go through the drive-through, or we drink a huge can of soda, or we're not putting the best things in our body. And yet we also know that when we aren't putting great things in our body, our energy totally tanks as well. So maybe we have a burst of energy, but then we're exhausted the rest of the day. So thinking about how when we make healthier choices, how it actually helps us sustain and actually helps us maybe get through the day a little bit better. So trying to have better options there when we are stressed. We know sleep plays a role in a lot of different ways, and it's very unique to each of us on sleep concerns. But if you're having a hard time sleeping, recognize, what do I do before bed? Am I scrolling through my phone? Am I answering emails? Am I staring at a TV? What are things that I could do before bed that may be helpful to wind down? That can be a little routine to help me not be on a blue screen, maybe take a moment to read a book, or have a conversation, whatever it may be, but thinking about what you do before bed and how that impacts our sleep. Exercise doesn't mean you're running marathons necessarily, even if that may be what you want to do, but it can be, a quick walk. It could be stretching. It could be doing a 5-minute ab exercise. It can be little things that can have a big impact, but somehow moving our body within a day. And then, as I mentioned, thinking about what do you actually enjoy doing, and finding time to do that. Doesn't have to be huge chunks of time. We can think small with this. Thinking about, how do you connect to others and what benefits are there? And, when I'm super stressed out, am I becoming a hermit? And recognizing, does that really help me? Or would it be helpful if I reached out and maybe got out and went to a dinner one night? That may be the one thing I need to kind of get some things off my mind. And we do know that, putting on your headphones or putting on a good show sometimes can be what we need as well, just to relieve some of the stress that we feel. So I want you just to think of one thing that you would like to start doing around your stress. Again, think really small, and in the chat, if you'd like to jot that down of what that may be, we would love to hear what that could be. In the past, we've had people say, like, for lunch, I'm going to pick just twice a week a healthier option. I'm going to bring my own meal instead of eating out all the time. Again, it's not changing everything, because maybe that's not realistic, but saying 2 days a week, that's something I can manage. Lisa mentioned yoga, so trying yoga out, which is great. If anybody else wants to jot down what they would like, better eating and more movement, drink more water daily, going to bed earlier, perfect. Well, I've heard a lot of journaling, that's a great one as well. A lot of people have been setting alarms to go to bed, which I think is an interesting way as well. Consistent sleep time, getting back on 11 to 7:30 sleep, yoga, scheduling night out with my girlfriends. Perfect. These are great. Take times to do crafts to relax. Meditation. Perfect. All right. And again, we'll do a way deeper dive on this in a couple weeks, but just something to start thinking about as well. Something else that we want to think about when it comes to stress is how we are very reactive with it. We feel that stress that we've been holding on to, and it is intense and in the moment, and that's really what we focus in on. We can be more proactive with our stress. And so what this wheel shows is that there tends to be 6 areas that we feel stress at some point or another, not consistently, but these tend to be 6 areas where we may have stress in our lives. And so what we can do is we can look at this and say, what are things that aren't necessarily really heavy right now, but maybe if I don't take care of them, they will become heavier down the road. So I can look at this and say, you know what, I haven't talked to my dad in a while. I need to give him a call. For relationship. Financially, I've been meaning to open a savings account for my daughters. Physical health, I haven't worked out in a long time. I want to figure out, what I would like to do to start moving my body again. So nothing massive or overwhelming, but they're little things that I can look at now, and then I can come back to in a couple weeks, in a month, whatever works for your time frame, and say, where am I in these things now? Are these becoming heavier for me? Am I taking care of these? How am I actually managing this? And so it can make us a little bit more proactive with our stress instead of always being very reactive with it. So what I'd like you to do is pick just one or two things within all of these. You don't have to pick one or two in each section, but just one or two that, again, aren't huge stressors for you right now, but something that's maybe been on your mind. Jot it down and then find a time to come back to it to see, how am I dealing with this? Am I putting this off? Am I accomplishing anything? And if I'm not, what do I need to change moving forward? So take a moment just to write that down for yourself. I like in the chat, this is a good one, cooking one veggie meal a week. Again, I like that idea for starting small and just an easy thing to start doing as well. So I like that added one too. Okay, a few last kind of pieces here. We know stress shows up in each of us very differently. So thinking about, what does it look like for you? Is it that hamster wheel in your head of kind of reoccurring thoughts? Is it in your feelings? Are you really sad? Are you angry? Is it in your actions? Are you irritable, or are you isolating? Does it come up in your body? Do you get intense headaches or stomach pains or muscle aches? So thinking about, how does stress actually show up for you, so that when we start recognizing that, like, oh, my neck is really starting to hurt, instead of just saying, oh, I slept weird, or maybe it's my chair, maybe take a step back and be like, what stress am I dealing with? What's going on? What do I need to change? And really paying attention to how that shows up. Other things just to note here, building in a little bit of awareness each day can be helpful. This is really simple. Noon each day, 3 o'clock, whatever it may be, take a moment and say, on a scale from 1 to 5, 5 being high, where is my stress right now? If we're noticing, I'm a 1, 2, 3 every once in a while, maybe I'm doing okay, feeling fine. If I'm noticing this whole week I'm at a 4 or 5, what do I need to do to change? What am I doing that's really contributing to this? Am I doing anything to minimize it? It gives us a gauge to recognize, when do I need to stop and actually take action on this? As we talked about before, kind of think about your life. Our lives are pretty predictable in most cases. We know when work is more stressful. We know when kids are in or out of school. We know when things are harder for us to manage, holidays are, whatever it may be. So thinking a little bit ahead and think about, well, how can I make that time not so stressful? And what are some things I can put in place now? We mentioned this as well, but really trying to get away from thinking about our time and think about our efficiency. In your day, how much time do we waste just scrolling on our phones? And how can I do a check-in and still have that time to do a little bit of that, but maybe take 15 minutes back in my day and actually focus on things I need to get done. And then again, really focusing on that self-care aspect as well. Things to note, obviously stress has a direct impact on our mental health. So if we are noticing that, I've tried some things here, or I know some coworkers or friends that are trying some things and things just are not getting better, like if anything, they're actually getting worse. That could be an important time to get help from the outside, from a professional, from somebody who may be able to help with this a little bit more. Also, if we are noticing that we're isolating more or avoiding things that we shouldn't be, and obviously if any kind of safety concerns arise as well. And then just to kind of sum up here, we know stress obviously has a very big impact on who we are, how we feel, how we show up, but also recognizing that we do have the ability to manage that and take action on it. So recognizing stress is not necessarily what kills us, but our reaction to it is. So hopefully you learned some tips and tools that can help with this just a little bit. Anybody have any questions? We've got about 4 minutes left. My email's here, so if you do have any questions that you kind of want to ask offline, please feel free to email me, or if you have anything that you would like to to discuss kind of further, please feel free to email me. Question was look ahead item for overreaction. I'm guessing is what you're talking about. So that one is just when, if you have if there's stressor, and again, it may not work for all of them, but if your stressor is something that is in the future or kind of a little bit out of reach, being a little bit more on the lookout of what can you do now to help with that down the line. So I gave the example of holidays. So maybe Christmas time, Thanksgiving is always a really stressful time, family, whatever it is. And we're stressing out about it now. What are things you can do now to maybe help minimize that a little bit more so that we're not just stressed and holding that stress that entire time? It kind of falls a little bit into that breaking it down too as well. And yes, this is recorded, so that will be able to be available as well.
Thanks so much, Alex. This has been really great information. I also wanted to just to offer, I'll put my email in the chat as well. I know that some of this is really intense stuff for some of us. Some of us have a lot of questions. Of course, Alex had put her email in, is on screen right now. I'm happy to share my email in the chat right now as well. If you have any questions, Alex is licensed. I'm not a licensed therapist. I am registered as a psychotherapist in Colorado, but I do have a lot of resources I can usually send people, forward you to if you're dealing with a specific problem or if you have a specific question. I'm pretty good at finding answers for you. And if there's something that Alex nor I can help you with, then I'm sure one of us would be happy to find somebody who could answer your question. So I'm going to type my email in the chat now, but if there are any other questions, please list them now, or I think we'll probably be ready to say goodbye for today and hopefully see you next week, same time and place. I don't see any questions coming through. I just dropped my email in. So again, thanks so much, Alex. This was great information, even though it's information that I've already seen previously. It's just something that I always need to come back to, and I think that a lot of people are going to find it super helpful. So thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you everyone. Thanks for joining.
Thanks. Bye.